Welcome. I'm Carolyn Waters, head librarian at the New York Society Library, the oldest library and cultural institution in New York City. We are so honored to present this fourth and final program in our Black Literature Matters series, exploring the works of African American writers over the centuries. Tonight's program will focus on the period 1960 to today and will follow a roughly chronological format organized by decade. As in our previous programs covering the 1700s, 1800s, 1900 to 1959, we are thrilled to have the brilliant actors Geoffrey D. Williams and Shontelle Thrash with us again to read from the works. As we discussed in prior programs, our library, founded in 1754, and other membership libraries of the time and afterward, played a role in the dissemination of Black writers over the centuries, making them more widely accessible to the public. The New York Society Library, now located at 53 East 79th Street in Manhattan, remains today an independent subscription library open to all who want to join. Tonight's program contains language that we do not condone, but we ask listeners to understand that we are honoring the work of the authors. Joining me again on the program is Dr. Farah Griffin from Columbia University. Dr. Griffin is the inaugural chair of the African American and African Diaspora Studies Department at Columbia, where she is also professor of English and comparative literature. Hi, Farah.
Hi there, Carolyn. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us again. With this evening's program, we look at writing from the 1960s until today. During this period, African American writers come into their own fully, cognizant of themselves as participating in overlapping traditions that include works by earlier Black writers, American writers of all races, a broader Western literary tradition, and also speaking to those from outside the West as well. Additionally, during this period, African American writers continue to offer prophetic vision to America, one that speaks the truth to power and offers a critical but more wide-ranging view of what the nation can and should be. They create innovative works of art that will reach ever-widening audiences as well. Tonight's program includes a sampling, just a handful, drawn from hundreds, maybe thousands of excellent Black writers that have emerged since 1960. Because of the volume of the writing, we've limited the program to great writers of poetry and creative prose. In order to include as many writers as possible, most excerpts are very short, but we've sprinkled in a few longer ones as well. Unlike previous programs, there is no established canon of Black literature for this period. That's exciting because it's yet being formed. The program is organized by decade, and we realize that this is an artificial way of categorizing the works, but our hope is to show the changing literary flavor and highlight decade-defining work. Many writers have written across the decade, but usually we place them in the decade where their work began to be read. This early work was often influential and even groundbreaking, even if the writers had not yet achieved wide acclaim.
As in previous programs in this series, the slideshow provides photos and brief bios of each author whose work will be read. However, the sheer volume of fine writers led us to include authors in the slideshow that time did not permit to feature in the readings.
We want to start by mentioning some Black writers were well published and read before the 60s, but they received wide literary recognition during this time. Two examples are Frank Yerby and Sterling Brown. In 1946, Yerby published The Foxes of the Harrow, a Southern historical romance which made him one of the first Black writers to achieve major commercial success. In this work, he faithfully reproduced many of the genre's most familiar features, with the notable exception of his representation of African American characters who bore little resemblance to the happy darkies that appeared in such well-known work as Gone with the Wind. That same year, he also became the first African American to have a book purchased for screen adaptation by a Hollywood studio when 20th Century Fox optioned Fox's. Ultimately, the book became a 1947 Oscar-nominated film of the same name, starring Rex Harrison and Maureen O'Hara.
A number of the works we featured throughout the series from the 1700s until today. The Foxes of Harrow was acquired by the New York Society Library's collection at the time of publication and appears in the library's March 1946 new books list.
Sterling Brown was a gifted poet and literary critic. His work found inspiration in African American folk culture, especially tall tales and the blues. His critical works and anthologies, including The Negro Caravan, are regarded as invaluable for the study of Black literature. He also influenced generations of students in Howard, most especially Amiri Baraka. The Black arts movement is a period in the 60s and the 70s, often referred to as the aesthetic and spiritual sister of the Black Power movement. Our last program highlighted two writers, our first two writers, who were popular during the 50s. Amiri Baraka, who previously wrote Leroy Jones, and Gwendolyn Brooks. Both of them continued to write and contributed in major ways to the Black arts movement.
A Short Speech to My Friends, Part 1, by Amiri Baraka. A political art, let it be tenderness, low strings the fingers touch, or the width of autumn climbing wider avenues among the virtue and dignity of knowing what city you're in, who to talk to, what clothes, even what buttons to wear. I address the society, the image of common utopia, the perversity of separation, isolation. After so many years of trying to enter their kingdoms, now they suffer in tears, these others, saxophones whining through the wooden doors of their less than gracious homes. The poor have become our creators, the Black, the thoroughly ignorant. Let the combination of morality and inhumanity begin.
Malcolm X by Gwendolyn Brooks. Original, ragged, round, rich, robust. He had the hawkman's eyes. We gasped. We saw the maleness raking out and making guttural the air and pushing us to walls. And in a soft and fundamental hour, a sorcery devout and vertical beguiled the world. He opened us, who was a key, who was a man.
Many other poets created the Black arts movement in the 1960s. We'll hear now from just a few others.
But He Was Cool, or He Even Stopped for Green Lights, by Haki Madhubuti. Super cool, ultra black, a tan purple had a beautiful shade. He had a double natural that would put the sisters to shame, and his beads were imported seashells from some Black country I never heard of. He was triple hip. His tikis were hand carved out of ivory and came express from the motherland. He would greet you in Swahili and say goodbye in Yoruba. Ooh, Jim, he be so cool and intelligent. Cool. It's so cool. He was uncooled by other niggas cool. Cool, ultra cool. Was bop cool, icebox cool. So cool, cold, cool. His wine didn't have to be cool. Him was air conditioned cool. Cool, real cool. Made me cool. Now, ain't that cool? Cool, so cool. Him nicknamed Refrigerator. Cool, so cool. He didn't know after Detroit, Newark, Chicago and company, we had to be hip. Cool, super cool, real cool, that to be Black is to be very hot.
Nikki Rosa by Nikki Giovanni. Childhood remembrances are always a drag. If you're Black, you always remember things like living in Woodlawn with no inside toilet. And if you become famous or something, they never talk about how happy you were to have your mother all to yourself and how good the water felt when you got your bath from one of those big tubs that folk in Chicago barbecue in. And somehow, when you talk about home, it never gets across how much you understood their feelings as the whole family attended meetings about Hollydale. And even though you remember, your biographers never understand your father's pain as he sells his stock and never dream goes. And though you're poor, it isn't poverty that concerns you. And though they fought a lot, it isn't your father's drinking that makes any difference, but only that everybody is together. And you and your sister have happy birthdays and very good Christmases. And I really hope no white person ever has cause to write about me because they never understand. Black love is Black wealth. And they'll probably talk about my hard childhood and never understand that all the while I was quite happy. Catch the Fire by Sonia Sanchez. Sometimes I wonder what to say to you now in the soft afternoon air as you hold us all in a single death. I say, where is your fire? I say, where is your fire? You got to find it and pass it on. You got to find it and pass it on from you to me, from me to her, from her to him, from the son to the father, from the brother to the sister, from the daughter to the mother, from the mother to the child. Where's your fire? I say, where is your fire? Oh, can't you smell it coming out of your past? The fire of living, not dying. The fire of loving, not killing. The fire of Blackness, not gangster shadows. Where is our beautiful fire that gave light to the world? The fire of pyramids. The fire that burned through the holes of slave ships and made us breathe. The fire that made guts into chitlins. The fire that took rhythms and made jazz. The fire of sit-ins and marches that made us jump boundaries and barriers. The fire that took street talk sounds and made righteous Imhotep raps. Where's your fire? The torch of life full of Nzinga and Nat Turner and Garvey and Du Bois and Fannie Lou Hamer and Martin and Malcolm and Mandela. Sister, sister, brother, brother, come, come.
Haki and Sonia, thank you. During the Black Arts Movement, Black writers not only focused on political matters, some of them, many of them, wrote lyrical love poems that were also emblematic of the times.
Love Song by Henry Dumas. Beloved, I have to adore the earth. The wind must have heard your voice once. It echoes and sings like you. The soil must have tasted you once. It is laden with your scent. The trees honor you in gold and blush when you pass. I know why the North Country is frozen. It has been trying to preserve your memory. I know why the desert burns with fever. It has wept too long without you. On hands and knees, the ocean begs up the beach and falls at your feet. I have to adore the mirror of the earth. You have taught her well how to be beautiful.
Henry Dumas is widely recognized as a Black arts movement writer of prose as well as poetry. This important writer is experiencing a resurgent readership, and a collection of his fiction was just reissued last week. Dumas was murdered by the New York City police in 1968. His loss to the literary world is an example of how Black lives matter. Here's a tiny excerpt from Ark of Bones, a short story.
What I saw, I'll never forget as long as I live. Bones. I saw bones that were stacked all the way to the top of the ship. I looked around. The underside of the whole ark was nothing but a great bone house. I looked and saw crews of Black men handling in them bones. There was a crew of 2 or 3 under every cabin around that ark. Why, there must have been 1 million cabins. They were doing it very carefully, like they were holding on to babies or something precious. Standing like a captain was the old man we had seen top deck. Son, you are in the house of generations. Every African who lives in America has a part of his soul in this ark.
Emerged as one of the most influential Black women writing from a feminist perspective. As a poet, novelist, and essayist, she gave voice to the intersectional nature of Black women's lives, especially Southern Black women. And with The Color Purple, she emerged as a significant, if controversial, American writer, becoming the first woman of color to win the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1983. Here's a poem from her first published book.
Women by Alice Walker. They were women then. My mama's generation, husky of voice, stout of step, with fists as well as hands. How they battered down doors and ironed starched white shirts. How they led armies, head-ragged generals across minefields, booby-trapped ditches to discover books, desks, a place for us. How they knew what we must know without knowing a page of it themselves. From The Color Purple. Dear God, that's it, says Suge. Pack your stuff. You coming back to Tennessee with me. But I feels days. My daddy lynch, my mama crazy, all my little half brothers and sisters, no kin to me. My children, not my sister and brother. Paul, not Paul. Oh, you must be asleep.
Prose written in the 1960s produced a number of classics that are widely read today. Here are short quotes from a few.
From the autobiography of Malcolm X by Malcolm X and Alex Haley. The next day I was in my car driving along the freeway when at a red light another car pulled alongside. A white woman was driving, and on the passenger side next to me was a white man. Malcolm X, he called out, and when I looked, he stuck his hand out of his car across at me, grinning. Do you mind shaking hands with a white man? Imagine that. Just as the traffic light turned green, I told him, I don't mind shaking hands with human beings. Are you one?
From Jubilee by Margaret Walker. Master John was returning home. Riding along the edge of his vast home properties, he was savoring the pleasant air of a bright September morning. His mind was not on the pedigreed hunting hounds he brought from Barrow, nor the good whiskey he drank with Crenshaw. His neighbors were coming home to his house for a hunting party as soon as the weather was cold enough. That would mark the beginning of his political campaign. Things ought to stack up in his favor as a candidate from Terrell County for the legislature. He expected to win hands down since he owned Terrell County and most of what was left of Lee County too. His drivers were already his deputy sheriffs. Law and order in the county were gradually taking shape under his hands with political organization as his ultimate goal. He owned enough slaves to give him a large number of votes. For every 5 slaves he could count, 3 votes.
Maya Angelou also began writing in the 1960s. Here's a chapter from her first book, published in 1969.
From I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. The last inch of space was filled, yet people continued to wedge themselves along the walls of the store. Uncle Willie had turned the radio up to its last notch so that youngsters on the porch wouldn't miss a word. Women sat on kitchen chairs, dining room chairs, stools, and upturned wooden boxes. Small children and babies perched on every lap available, and men leaned on the shelves or on each other. The apprehensive mood was shot through with shafts of gaiety as a black sky is streaked with lightning. I ain't worried about this fight. Joe's gonna whip that cracker like it's open season. He gonna whip him till that white boy call him mama. At last, the talking was finished and the string-along songs about razor blades were over, and the fight began. Quick jab to the head. In the store, the crowd grunted. Left to the head and a right, and another left. One of the listeners cackled like a hen and was quieted. They're in a clinch. Lewis is trying to fight his way out. Some bitter comedian on the porch said, that white man don't mind hugging that nigga now, I bet you. The referee is moving in to break them up, but Lewis finally pushed the contender away, and it's an uppercut to the chin. The contender is hanging on. Now he's backing away. Lewis catches him with a short left to the jaw. A tide of murmuring assent poured out the doors and into the yard. Another left and another left. Lewis is saving that mighty right. The mother in the store had grown into a baby roar, and it was pierced by the clang of a bell and the announcers, that's the bell for round 3, ladies and gentlemen. As I pushed my way into the store, I wondered if the announcer gave any thought to the fact that he was addressing as ladies and gentlemen all the Negroes around the world who sat sweating and praying, glued to their master's voice. There were only a few calls for RC Colas, Dr. Peppers, and Hires root beer. The real festivities would begin after the fight. Then, even the old Christian ladies who taught their children and tried themselves to practice turning the other cheek would buy soft drinks, and if the Brown Bombers' victory was a particularly bloody one, they would order peanut patties and Baby Ruths also. Bailey and I laid the coins on top of the cash register. Uncle Willie didn't allow us to ring up sales during the fight. It was too noisy and might shake up the atmosphere. When the gong rang for the next round, we pushed through the near sacred quiet to the herd of children outside. He's got Lewis against the ropes, and now it's a left to the body and a right to the ribs. Another left, right to the body. It looks like it was low. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the referee is signaling, but the contender keeps raining the blows on Lewis. It's another to the body, and it looks like Lewis is going down. My race groaned. It was our people falling. It was another lynching, yet another Black man hanging on a tree. One more woman abused and raped. A black boy whipped and maimed. It was hounds on the trail of a man running through slimy swamps. It was a white woman slapping her maid for being forgetful. The men in the store stood away from the walls and at attention. Women greedily clutched the babies on their laps, while on the porch the shufflings and smiles, flirtings and pinching of a few minutes before were gone. This might be the end of the world. If Joe lost, we were back in slavery and beyond help. It would all be true. The accusations that we were lower types of human beings, only a little higher than the apes. True that we were stupid and ugly and lazy and dirty and unlucky, and worst of all, that God himself hated us and ordained us to be hewers of wood and drawers of water forever and ever, world without end. We didn't breathe. We didn't hope. We waited. He's off the ropes, ladies and gentlemen. He's moving toward the center of the ring. There was no time to be relieved. The worst might still happen. And now it looks like Joe is mad. He caught Canero with a left hook to the head and a right to the head. It's a left jab to the body and another left to the head. There's a left cross and a right to the head. The contender's right eye is bleeding and he can't seem to keep his block up. Lewis is penetrating every block. The referee is moving in, but Lewis sends a left to the body, and it's an uppercut to the chin, and the contender is dropping. He's on the canvas, ladies and gentlemen. Baby slid to the floor as women stood up and men leaned toward the radio. Here's the referee. He's counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is the contender trying to get up again? All the men in the store shouted, no. 8, 9, 10. There were a few sounds from the audience, but they seemed to be holding themselves in against tremendous pressure. The fight is over, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get the microphone over to the referee. Here he is. He's got the brown bomber's hand. He's holding it up. Here he is. Then the voice, husky and familiar, came to wash over us. The winner and still heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Louis. Champion of the world. A black boy, some black mother's son. He was the strongest man in the world. People drank Coca-Colas like ambrosia and ate candy bars like Christmas. Some of the men went behind the store and poured white lightning in their soft drink bottles, and a few of the bigger boys followed them. Those who were not chased away came back blowing their breath in front of themselves like proud smokers. Whew. It would take an hour or more before the people would leave the store and head for home. Those who lived too far had made arrangements to stay in town. It wouldn't do for a black man and his family to be caught on a lonely country road on a night when Joe Louis had proved that we were the strongest people in the world.
Graham continued writing during this period and produced some of his strongest works. Here is an excerpt from The Fire Next Time, published in 1963.
Selection from My Dungeon Shook, a letter to my nephew on the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation. Well, you were born. Here you came, something like 15 years ago. And though your father and mother and grandmother, looking about the streets through which they were carrying you, staring at the walls into which they brought you, had every reason to be heavy-hearted, yet they were not. For here you were, Big James, named for me, but you were a big baby. I was not. Here you were, to be loved, baby, hard at once and forever, to strengthen you against the loveless world. I remember that. I know how black it looks today for you. It looked bad that day too. Yes, we were trembling. We have not stopped trembling yet, but if we had not loved each other, none of us would have survived. And now you must survive because we love you, and for the sake of your children and your children's children.
Ernest Gaines began writing in the 1960s and received widespread acclaim when the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman was made into the movie starring Cicely Tyson. We'll hear an excerpt from a novel he wrote 20 years later in 1993.
From A Lesson Before Dying by Ernest J. Gaines. Those out there are no better than we are, Jefferson. They are worse. That's why they are always looking for a scapegoat, someone else to blame. Now, I want you to show them the difference between what they think you are and what you can be. Now, to them, you're nothing but another nigger. No dignity, no heart, no love for your people. You can prove them wrong. You can do more than I can ever do. I've always done what they wanted me to do. Teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. Nothing else. Nothing about dignity. Nothing about identity. Nothing about loving and caring. See, they never thought we were capable of learning these things. Teach those niggers how to print their names and how to figure on their fingers. And I went along, but hating myself all the time for doing so.
Literature from this period had a profound effect on other media, especially recordings and films. We'll hear what became almost an anthem of the 1970s, Gil Scott-Heron's Revolution Will Not Be Televised from 1970. And then we'll see a clip from the TV series Roots, Alex Haley's The Saga of an American Family from 1976. Alex Haley's Roots was a best-selling book that went on to become a widely watched television series and to inspire large numbers of Americans of all races to pursue their own genealogical research.
You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the Schaefer Award Theater and will not star Natalie Woods and Steve McQueen or Bullwinkle and Julia. The revolution will not give your mouth sex appeal. The revolution will not get rid of the nub. The revolution will not make you look 5 pounds thinner because the revolution will not be televised, brother. There will be no pictures of you and Willie Mae pushing that shopping cart down the block on the dead run or trying to slide that color TV into a stolen ambulance. NBC will not be able to predict the winner at 8:32 on report from 29 districts. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of Whitney Young being run out of Harlem on a rail with a brand new process. There will be no slow motion or still lights of Roy Wilkins strolling through Watts in a red, black, and green liberation jumpsuit that he has been saving for just the proper occasion. Green Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, and Hooterville Junction will no longer be so damn relevant, and women will not care if Dick finally got down with Jane on Search for Tomorrow, because black people will be in the street looking for a brighter day. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no highlights on the 11 o'clock news and no pictures of Harry R. women liberationists and Jackie Onassis blowing her nose. The theme song will not be written by Jim Webb or Francis Scott Keys, nor sung by Glenn Campbell, Tom Jones, Johnny Cash, Engelbert Humperdinck, or The Rare Earth. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be right back after a message about a white tornado, white lightning, or white people. You will not have to worry about a dove in your bedroom, the tiger in your tank, or the giant in your toilet bowl. The revolution will not go better with Coke. The revolution will not fight germs that may cause bad breath. The revolution will put you in the driver's seat. The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers. The revolution will be live.
The first was when I was just a girl. We was married Christian. That master didn't believe in Jesus for niggas. I love that man. His name was Ben. We had 2 little baby girls. One night he run off. I helped him. He was gonna get free and then fetch me and the babies, and we all be free. But they catched him. They catched him, and they hanged him, and they sold off my babies. Never seen those sweet babies for the rest of my whole life. You keep talking about Africa and getting free, and something terrible is gonna happen. One more terrible thing happened in my life, Toby, and I just die. I just die.
During and following the Black arts movement, a host of important women authors emerged. They wrote poetry and prose on women's themes, what has been termed intersectionality by Kimberly Crenshaw. Let's start with the prose from 2 authors named Toni.
From Gorilla, My Love, by Toni Cade Bambara. You a lying dog, I say, when I meant to say treacherous dog, but just couldn't get hold of the word. It slipped away from me, and I'm frying and crumpling down in the seat and just don't care. And Granddaddy say to hush and steps on the gas, and I'm losing my bearings and don't even know where to look on the map because I can't see for crying. And baby Jason crying too, because he is my blood brother and understands that we must stick together or be forever lost. What with grown-ups playing change up and turning you round every which way so bad. And don't even say they sorry. From Beloved by Toni Morrison. Here, she said, in this here place, we flesh that weeps, laughs, flesh that dances on bare feet in grass. Love it hard. Yonder, they do not love your flesh, they despise it. They don't love your eyes, they just as soon pick them out. No more do they love the skin on your back. Yonder, they flay it. And oh, my people, they do not love your hands. Those they only use, tie, bind, chop off, and leave empty. Love your hands. Love them. Raise them up and kiss them, touch others with them, pat them together, stroke them on your face, 'cause they don't love that either. You got to love it, you. And no, they ain't in love with your mouth. Yonder out there, they will see it broken and break it again. What you say out of it, they will not heed. What you scream from it, they do not hear. What you put into it to nourish your body, they will snatch it away and give you leavings instead. No, they don't love your mouth. You got to love it. Feet that need rest and to dance, backs that need support, shoulders that need arms, strong arms, I'm telling you. And oh, my people, out yonder, hear me. They do not love your neck unnoosed and straight. So, love your neck. Put a hand on it, grace it, stroke it, hold it up. And all your inside parts that they just as soon slop for hogs, you got to love them. The dark, dark liver, love it, love it. And the beat and beating heart, love that too. Oh, more than eyes or feet, more than lungs that have yet to draw free air, more than your life-holding womb and your life-giving private parts. Hear me now. Love your heart, for this is the prize. From For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough by Ntozake Shange. Somebody, anybody sing a Black girl song? Bring her out to know herself, to know you, but sing her rhythms, caring, struggle, hard times. Sing her song of life. Oh, she's been dead so long, closed in silence so long. She doesn't even know the sound of her own voice, her infinite beauty. She's half notes scattered without rhythm. No tune. Sing her sighs. Sing the song of her possibilities. Sing a righteous gospel. Let her be born. Let her be born and handled warmly.
Other essential poets of the period are Audre Lorde, Bell Hooks, June Jordan, and Lucille Clifton, all of whom continued to write for decades and gained wider popularity later.
Coal by Audre Lorde. I is the total black, being spoken from the earth's inside. There are many kinds of open. How a diamond comes into a knot of flame, how a sound comes into a word colored by who pays what for speaking. Some words are open, like a diamond on glass windows singing out within the crash of passing sun. Then there are words like stapled wagers in a perforated book, buy and sign and tear apart, and come whatever wills all chances. The stub remains an ill-pulled tooth with a ragged edge. Some words live in my throat, breeding like adders. Others know sun seeking like gypsies over my tongue to explode through my lips like young sparrows bursting from shell. Some words bedevil me. Love is a word another kind of open. As a diamond comes into a knot of flame, I am black because I come from the earth's inside. Take my word for jewel in your open light. From Appalachian Elegy by Bell Hooks. 1. I hear them cry. The long dead, the long gone speak to us. From beyond the grave, guide us, that we may learn all the ways to hold tender this land. Hard clay direct, rock upon rock, charred earth, and time. Strong green growth will rise here, trees back to life, native flowers pushing the fragrance of hope, the promise of resurrection. 2. Such then is beauty surrendered. Against all hope, you are here again, turning slowly, nature as chameleon, all life change and changing again, awakening hearts, steady moving from unnamed loss into fierce, deep grief that can bear all burdens, even the long passage into a shadowy dark where no light enters. Democracy poem number 1 by June Jordan. Tell them that I stood in line and I waited like everybody else, but I never got called, and I keep that scrap of paper in my pocket just in case. Won't You Celebrate With Me by Lucille Clifton. Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it all up here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come, celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed.
Black male poets, of course, continued writing powerful verse. We'll hear a brief excerpt from Pulitzer Prize winner Yusef Kusama.
From Neon Vernacular. My doors enter from the side street, my windows painted basement black, my mouth kisses the blues harp, my heart hides like notes locked in a cedar chest.
As mentioned in previous programs, Black writers worked in all genres. Readers in the 70s and even more so in the 80s found masterful Black authors of science fiction and mystery. Here is an excerpt from Octavia Butler's first published novel, Kindred, written in 1979.
From Kindred by Octavia Butler. Everything vanished. Suddenly, I was outdoors, kneeling on the ground beneath trees. I was in a green place. I was at the edge of a wood. Before me was a wide, tranquil river, and near the middle of that river was a child, splashing, screaming, drowning. I reacted to the child in trouble. I ran down to the river, waded into the water, fully clothed, and swam quickly to the child. He was unconscious by the time I reached him. A small red-haired boy floating face down. I turned him over, got a good hold on him so that his head was above water and towed him in. There was a red-haired woman waiting for us on the shore now. Or rather, she was running back and forth crying on the shore. The moment she saw that I was waiting, she ran out, took the boy from me, and carried him the rest of the way, feeling and examining him as she did. "He's not breathing," she screamed. Artificial respiration. I had seen it done, been told about it, but I had never done it. Now was the time to try. The woman was in no condition to do anything useful, and there was no one else in sight. As I reached shore, I snatched a child from her. He was no more than 4 or 5 years old and not very big. I put him down on his back, tilted his head back, and began mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. I saw his chest move as I breathed into him. Then, suddenly, the woman began beating on me. "You killed my baby," she screamed. "You killed him." I turned and managed to catch her pounding fist. "Stop it," I shouted, putting all the authority I could into my voice. "He's alive." "What the devil's going on here?" A man's voice, angrily and demanding. I turned startled and found myself looking down the barrel of the longest rifle I had ever seen. I heard a metallic click, and I froze, thinking I was going to be shot for saving the boy's life. I was going to die. I tried to speak, but my voice was suddenly gone. I felt sick and dizzy. My vision blurred so badly I could not distinguish the gun or the face of the man behind it. I heard the woman speak sharply, but I was too far gone into sickness and panic to understand what she said. Then the man, the woman, the boy, the gun all vanished. I was kneeling in the living room of my own house again, several feet from where I had fallen minutes before. I was back at home, wet and muddy, but intact.
The 1980s opened the floodgates for Black writers of what became known as literary commercial fiction. Here are very brief quotes from a select handful of these writers who emerged in the 1980s.
From Brothers and Keepers by John Edgar Wideman. Kids use words in ways that release hidden meanings, reveal the history buried in sounds. They haven't forgotten that words can be more than signs, that words have magic, the power to be things, to point to themselves and materialize. With their back formations, archaisms, their tendency to play the music in words, rhythm, rhyme, alliteration, repetition, children peel the skin from language. Words become incantatory, open sesame, abracadabra. Perhaps a child will remember the word and will bring the walls tumbling down.
From Corregidora by Gail Jones. I wanted a song that would touch me, touch my life and theirs, a Portuguese song, but not a Portuguese song, a New World song, a song branded with the New World. I thought of the girl who had to sleep with her master and mistress, her father, the master, her daughter's father, the father of her daughter's daughter. How many generations? Days that were pages of hysteria, their survival deepened on suppressed hysteria. From Mama Day by Gloria Naylor. She could walk through a lightning storm without being touched, grab a bolt of lightning in the palm of her hand, use the heat of lightning to start the kindling going under her medicine pot. She turned the moon into salve, the stars into swaddling cloth, and healed the wounds of every creature walking up on 2 or down on 4. From Some Soul to Keep by J. California Cooper. Superior, do you understand me? These are white people. They are not like you or me or us. They have the power to hurt you. And sometimes it's fun to them when they do. Their power is not because they are smart. It's because something happened sometime. Started somewhere and they got on top of the world. They got the power. The only power you got is to learn to live with them. Learn to read their minds till you can do better. They don't treat each other right. So don't you look to be treated right. You hear me? Sometimes there's good white people, but don't you act like that till you know that.
Here's a longer excerpt from the writer whose novel, Waiting to Exhale, broke sales barriers in women's fiction and opened commercial doors to Black women's stories. It was made into a box office hit movie. The excerpt is from McMillan's first novel, Mama, published in 1987, before Waiting to Exhale.
From Mama by Terry McMillan. Mildred had had Frida when she was 17, and the other kids had fallen out every 9 or 10 months after that, with the exception of 1 year between Frida and Money. Crook had told her he didn't want any more kids until he got on his feet. Frida was almost 3 months old when Mildred realized she was pregnant again. She was too scared to tell Crook, so she asked her sister-in-law what she should do. Curly Mae told her to take 3 5-milligram quinine tablets. When that didn't work, she told her to drink some citrate of magnesia and take a dry mustard bath. A week later, she went to the bathroom feeling like she was going to have a bowel movement and had a miscarriage. Motherhood meant everything to Mildred. When she was first carrying Frida, she didn't believe her stomach would actually grow, but when she felt it stretched like the skin of a drum and it swelled up like a small brown moon, she'd never been so happy. She felt there was more than just a cord connecting her to this boy or girl that was moving inside her belly. There was some special juice, and only she could supply it. And sometimes when she turned over at night, she could feel the baby turn inside her too. And she knew this was magic.
The 90s were a wellspring of commercial fiction across genres. Like Black fiction from previous periods, these novels incorporated social justice issues and themes of racial relations. Here's an excerpt from Bebe Moore Campbell's 1994 novel, Brothers and Sisters.
From Brothers and Sisters by Bebe Moore Campbell. Mallory sighed. As Esther glanced at her, she seemed confused and unhappy. So, I guess you think that affirmative action is the answer. Do you mean affirmative action for white people or for Black people? Mallory looked startled again. You think America is a meritocracy? You've had affirmative action for white folks ever since this country got started. Every time a Black person couldn't get the job because he was Black, that was affirmative action for white people. Every time we get turned away from the luxury apartment building and the new housing development, that's affirmative action for white people. And it's not because you work harder and you're smarter and have higher SATs. It's because you're white. So hell yeah, I want some affirmative action for Black people. I want some jobs reserved for me. I want some prime real estate reserved for me. I want spots in the best schools set aside for me. I want the Justice Department to bend the law my way. Mallory looked at Esther, saw the bitterness in her face, and felt small and weak. You make me feel guilty. Guilty about what? Guilty about being white. She knew her words sounded ridiculous the instant she spoke them. She wanted to call them back. Esther glared at her. Ever since she and Mallory had become closer, the little things she'd always tried to keep hidden from white people she worked with were gradually slipping out. Her mask was no longer in place.
Black writers have long written commercial fiction, such as mysteries. Walter Mosley, in The Devil in a Blue Dress, published in 1990, swept the mystery genre. This one was the first of his Easy Rawlins series, which was later made into a film.
From Devil in a Blue Dress by Walter Mosley. I was surprised to see a white man walking into Joppy's bar. It's not just that he was white, but he wore an off-white linen suit and shirt with a Panama straw hat and bone shoes over flashing white silk socks. His skin was smooth and pale with just a few freckles. One lick of strawberry blonde hair escaped the band of his hat. He stopped in the doorway, filling it with his large frame, and surveyed the room with pale eyes. Not a color I'd ever seen in a man's eyes. When he looked at me, I felt a thrill of fear, but that went away quickly because I was used to white people by 1948. I had spent 5 years with white men and women, from Africa to Italy, through Paris, and into the fatherland itself. I ate with them and slept with them, and I killed enough blue-eyed young men to know that they were just as afraid to die as I was. The white man smiled at me. Then he walked to the bar where Joppy was running a filthy rag over the marble top. They shook hands and exchanged greetings like old friends. The second thing that surprised me was that he made Joppy nervous. Joppy was a tough ex-heavyweight who was comfortable brawling in the ring or in the street, but he ducked his head and smiled at that white man, just like a salesman whose luck had gone bad. I put $1 down on the bar and made to leave, but before I was off the stool, Joppy turned my way and waved me toward them. Come on over here, Easy. This here's somebody I want y'all to meet. And I could feel those pale eyes on me. This here's an old friend of mine's, Easy, Mr. Albright. You can call me DeWitt, Easy, the white man said. And his grip was strong but slithery, like a snake coiling around my hand. Hello, I said. Yeah, Easy, Joppy went on, bowing and grinning. Mr. Albright and me go way back. You know, he probably my oldest friend from LA. Yeah, we go ways back. Well, that's right, Albright smiled. It must have been 1935 when I met Jop. What is it now? Must be 13 years. Well, that was back before the war, before every farmer and his brother's wife wanted to come to LA. Well, Joppy guffawed at the joke. I smiled politely. I was wondering what kind of business Joppy had with that man, and along with that, I wondered what kind of business that man could have with me.
The 1990s also produced a new genre of commercial fiction, usually called urban novels. Here are very brief quotes from the writer who defined the genre, Sister Souljah, born Lisa Williamson.
From The Coldest Winter Ever by Sister Souljah. Drugs is a government game, Bilal. A way to rob us of our best black man, our army. Everyone who plays the game loses. Then they get you right back where we started, in slavery. Then they get to say, this time you did it to yourself. I won't play that game. From A Moment of Silence, third book of the Midnight series. Man, I know these Americans believe that all men are created equal. I don't. I believe all men are created, period. And each man makes choices and takes action one way or another. What a man chooses to do or not to do is the only way to measure his worth. A man who chooses to love is not equal to a man who chooses not to love. A man who chooses to build is not equal to a man who destroys.
Alongside urban or street fiction, writers like Guy Johnson, who published his 1998 novel to an almost cult-like readership of Black men, continued the tradition of writers such as Frankie Irving.
From Standing at the Scratch Line by Guy Johnson. I've told you before not to call me nigger. I hate that word. Whenever I hears it, don't matter who's saying it, I see white skin and white thinking. The white man got you calling yourself what he calls you when you don't want to be polite. Now that ain't me. I ain't never gonna be a nigger. Now, if you don't know me well enough to call me by my first name, call me Mister. Now, figure out what you want done with the gold. Professor and me gonna scout for a road leading us to the bridge.
A number of authors from the Caribbean became important during this period, including Jamaica Kincaid and Carol Phillips, paving the way for currently popular ones like Marlon James. We'll hear a quote from Edwidge Danticat's first short story collection in 1996, which followed her captivating novel, Breath, Eyes, Memory, published in 1994.
From Crick Crack by Edwidge Danticat. You remember thinking while braiding your hair that you look a lot like your mother and her mother before her. It was their whispers that pushed you, their murmurs over pots sizzling in your head. 1,000 women urging you to speak through the blunt tip of your pencil. Kitchen poets, you call them. Ghosts like burnished branches on a flame tree. These women, they asked for your voice so that they could tell your mother in your place that yes, women like you do speak, even if they speak in a tongue that is hard to understand, even if it's patois dialect Creole.
Derek Walcott's Omeros explores the colonial history of St. Lucia, where Walcott was born, as well as the vocational journey of the poet whose voice is joined to the island. It is a book-long epic poem that, like Joyce's Ulysses, takes Homer's Odyssey as its mythical prototype and adapts Dante's Terza Rima into English as a verse form with the symbolic subtlety of poetry and the narrative power of prose.
From Omeros by Derek Walcott. Oh, was the conch shell's invocation. Mere was both mother and sea in our Antillean patois. Os, a gray bone, and the white surf as it crashes and spreads its sibilant collar on a lace shore. Omeros was the crunch of dry leaves and the washes that echoed from a cave mouth when the tide has ebbed.
As we enter the 21st century, Black writers emerged at the very center of American literary culture. We'll hear 2 consecutive readings of popular poets, Elizabeth Alexander and Claudia Rankine.
From Ars Poetica, number 100, I Believe, by Elizabeth Alexander. Poetry, I tell my students, is idiosyncratic. Poetry is where we are ourselves, though Sterling Brown said every eye is a dramatic eye, digging in the clam flats for the shell that snaps, emptying the proverbial pocketbook. Poetry is what you find in the dirt in the corner, over here on the bus, God in the details, the only way to get from here to there. Poetry, and now my voice is rising, is not all love, 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 and I'm sorry the dog died. Poetry, here I hear myself loudest, is the human voice. And are we not of interest to each other? Some years, there exists a wanting to escape by Claudia Rankine from Citizen. Some years, there exists a wanting to escape you, floating above your certain ache. Still, the ache coexists. Call that the imminent you. You are you even before you grow into understanding you are not anyone, worthless, not worth you. Even as your own weight insists, you are here, fighting off the weight of non-existence. And still this life parts your lids. You see you seeing your extending hand as a falling wave. I, they, he, she, we, you turn only to discover the encounter, to be alien to this place. Wait. The patience is in the living. Time opens out to you. The opening between you and you occupied, zoned for an encounter, given the histories of you, and always who is you? The start of you each day, a presence already. Hey, you.
Fiction by Black authors has continued to flourish. We'll hear very brief excerpts from 2003 Pulitzer Prize winner Edward P. Jones and 2004 World Fantasy Award winner Nalo Hopkinson.
From the Known World by Edward P. Jones. It mattered not how long he had wandered in the wilderness, how long they had kept him in chains, how long he had helped them and kept himself in his own chains. None of that mattered now. He patted the baby's back, turned around and went back to the Richmond home for colored orphans. No, it did not matter. It mattered only that those kind of chains were gone and that he had crawled out into the clearing and was able to stand up on his hind legs and look around and appreciate the difference between then and now, even on the awful Richmond days when the now came dressed as the then.
From So Long Been Dreaming, Post-Colonial Science Fiction and Fantasy by Nalo Hopkinson. I made myself listen to the birds singing squabbles and love songs. Occasionally, I heard a war. Sharp mechanical sounds clashed with the nature music. Bells and whistles mashed together in nagging bursts. My new life was calling. I had to get on with it. Body historians, griots of the galaxy. We didn't diddle ourselves in jungle paradises. We inhabited flesh to gather a genealogy of life. We sought the story behind all the stories.
Wallace Thurman from the Harlem Renaissance was one of the first writers to introduce openly gay subject matter, themes, and social issues. Writers like E. Lynn Harris followed in his wake.
From I Say a Little Prayer by E. Lynn Harris.
Ooh.
Ask him where Black, gay, and lesbian people go who believe in God with all their heart when we're not welcome in our churches. Not only in Denver and Atlanta, but all over this country. Ask him where we go to be nurtured and express our faith. Where do we go for forgiveness?
Is one of today's most widely read writers. His first book was published in 2008.
From The Beautiful Struggle. My hand was awkward, and when I rhymed, the couplets would not adhere. Punchlines crashed into bars, metaphors were extended until they derailed off beat. I was unfit, but still I had at it for days, months, and ultimately years. And the more ink I dribbled onto the page, the more I felt the blessing of the Jedi Order of MCs. I wrote every day that summer, rhymed over B-side instrumentals until my pen was a staff of the dreaded streets, plus 5 Chanchetto banished fools on sight, and my flow, though flicked and disjointed, a horn of ghetto blasting. The words were all braggadocious, but when done with the recital, even though I was alone, I felt bigger. I'd walked outside and my head was just a little higher, because if you do this right, if you claim to be that nigga enough, Though you battle only your bedroom mirror, there is a part of you that believes. That was how I came to understand, how I came to know why all these brothers wrote and talked so big. Even the knowledge feared the streets. But the rhyme pad was a spell book. It summoned asphalt elementals, elder gods, and weeping ancestors, all of whom had my back. That summer, I knew what Fruity was trying to say, that when under the aegis of hip hop, you never lived alone, you never walked alone. I harried Big Bill until he took me up to Wabash to spit a sloppy verse. Marlon had cordoned off his father's basement. He presided over the 1200s, spinning break beats. Joey played with keys until he found a riff he liked. I just sat on the couch going over my rhymes, while Bill stood blessing the mic behind what was once a bar. By then, I had raided the tall box of my father's old collection of Black Panther newspapers, devoured them during off hours in Dad's office, and scribbled allusions to them in my book of rhymes. Dad no longer had to assign readings. My comics collections lapsed. Cartoons felt non-essential. I plunged into my father's books of consciousness that he'd shelved in nearly every room in the house. That was how I found myself, how I learned my name. All my life, Dad had told me what I was, that Ta-Nehisi was a nation, the ancient Egyptian name for the mighty Nubians to the south. But I could not truly hear. From where I'm from, Tamika is an American name, but Ta-Nehisi was a hyphen and easily bent to the whims of anyone who knew the rudiments of the dozens. But seeing that handle among the books of glorious Africa, I knew why I could never be Javon or Pete. That was my name, that my name was a nation, not a target, not something for teachers to trip over, but the ancient Nubians and the glorious Egyptians of the 25th. I felt a light flowing through me. I awoke, excited, hungry to understand this immediate world and how we had all fallen to this.
Angela Davis began writing in the 1970s. Her writing had a huge impact then. Like so many writers of the 1970s who remain at work today, we wanted to hear a snippet of a piece she published in 2015.
Freedom is a constant struggle. Ferguson, Palestine, and the Foundations of a Movement by Angela Davis. If indeed all lives mattered, we would not need to emphatically proclaim that Black lives matter. Or, as we discover on the BLM website, Black women matter, Black girls matter, Black gay lives matter, Black bi lives matter, Black boys matter, Black queer lives matter, Black men matter, Black lesbians matter, Black trans lives matter, Black immigrants matter, Black incarcerated lives matter. Black differently abled lives matter. Yes, Black lives matter. Latino, Asian American, Native American, Muslim, poor and working class, white people's lives matter. There are many more specific instances we would have to name before we can ethically and comfortably claim that all lives matter.
Dominican-American writer Junot Diaz is a major literary talent. His first book was published in 2007.
The Beginning of the Brief, Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. They say it came first from Africa, carried in the screams of the enslaved, that it was the death of bane of the Taínos, uttered just as one would perish, one world perished and another began, that it was a demon drawn into creation through the nightmare door that was cracked open in the Antilles. Fuku Americanus, or more colloquially, Fuku, generally a curse or a doom of some kind, specifically the curse and the doom of the New World. Also called the Fuku of the Admiral, because the Admiral was both its midwife and one of its great European victims. Despite discovering the New World, the Admiral died, miserable and syphilitic, hearing divine voices, Diki. In Santo Domingo, the land he loved best, what Oscar at the end would call the ground zero of the New World, the Admiral's very name has become synonymous with both kinds of fuku, little and large. To say his name aloud, or even to hear it, is to invite calamity on the heads of you and yours. No matter what its name or provenance, it is believed that the arrival of Europeans on Hispaniola unleashed the fuku on the world, and we've all been in the shit ever since. Santo Domingo might be fuku's kilometer zero, its port of entry, but we are all of us, its children, whether we know it or not.
There are so many writers who have emerged in recent years, among them Britt Bennett, Samantha Irby, Roxane Gay, Kylie Reed, but none quite as significant and important in all genres of literary fiction and nonfiction, prose, memoir as Jesmyn Ward. Ward is one of the most compelling writers of our moment.
From Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward. And when I am weary, I imagine this. After the moment I die, I will find myself standing on the side of a long, pitted asphalt road, flanked on both sides by murmuring pine trees, under a hot, high sun in a blue sky. In the distance, I will hear a rumbling, thumping, a bass beat. A dull blue 85 Cutlass will cut the horizon, come growling down the road before stopping in front of me. I will stop so quickly the gravel will crunch. And then my brother will swing the passenger door wide open, one long tattooed arm, the other on the wheel. He will look at me with his large, dark, liquid eyes, his face soft. He will know that I have been waiting. He will say, "Come. Come, take a ride with me." I will, brother. I'm here.
Science fiction Black writers are currently enjoying the popularity that would make Octavia Butler dance in her grave. We'll hear a brief quote from the 2020 Hugo Award winner N.K. Jemisin's work, 2016 book.
From the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. Tell them they can be great someday like us. Tell them they belong among us no matter how we treat them. Tell them they must earn the respect which everyone else receives by default. Tell them there is a standard for acceptance. That standard is simply perfection. Kill those off who scoff at those contradictions and tell the rest that the dead deserved annihilation for their weakness and doubt. Then they'll break themselves trying for what they'll never achieve.
We'll end our program with a poem by a young Black writer who shows us why Black literature matters. Life in literature is connected. Literature is life-giving.
A poem by Danez Smith, Alternate Names for Black Boys. 1. Smoke above the burning bush. 2. Arch nemesis of summer night. 3. First son of soil. 4. Coal awaiting spark and wind. 5. Guilty until proven dead. 6. Oil heavy starlight. 7. Monster until proven ghost. 8. Gone. 9, Phoenix who forgets to unash. 10, going, going, gone. 11, gods of shovels and black veils. 12, what once passed for kindling. 13, fireworks at dawn. 14, brilliant, shadow-hued coral. 15, well, I thought to leave this blank, but who am I to name us nothing? 16, prayer, who learned to bite and sprint. 17, a mother's joy and clutched breath.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of the works of African American writers from 1960 to today. I hope you enjoyed it. It looks from the chat like you did, so this is great. We are going to begin the Q&A in just a few minutes, but a few last words. For those of you who joined us tonight who didn't get a chance to see our previous programs on the 1700s, the 1800s, and 1900 to 1959, I hope you will go out to our website at nysoclib.org, where you will find the videos of the prior programs. They've all been spectacular. And we are so pleased to be able to welcome visitors in person to our Peluso Family Exhibition Gallery here at the library to view our new exhibition, Black Literature Matters, which just opened last month. It will be up for the next year. The exhibition has been co-curated by Dr. Farah Griffin and our own head of exhibitions, Harriet Shapiro. The show features the library's remarkable holdings of books by Black writers dating from the late 18th century to the present day. And the exhibition will be open 7 days a week during library open hours. So I hope you will all have an opportunity to come see that over the next year that it will be up. And one last thing before we get to the Q&A, I very much want to thank all the people who have worked so heroically to bring this 4-event series to life, as well as the exhibition that is on now. Thank you, Geoffrey D. Williams and Shontelle Thrash. I don't think we could have found any more extraordinary readers for these works. You really brought these writers to life, and it was really, truly extraordinary. Thanks to Dr. Farah Griffin, our spirit guide and scholar extraordinaire, and as I mentioned, the guest curator of our exhibition. And there aren't enough accolades to thank all of those behind the scenes. It's an extraordinary team, an exceptional team of trustees, members, and staff who worked on this project. Barbara Asher, Christina Amato, Barbara Beek, Adrian Ingram, Sarah Holliday, Jenny Lawrence, Lynn Carey Maida, Maria Luisa Monda, Harriet Shapiro. And I would also like to acknowledge the generous support of the Florence Gould Foundation in supporting these efforts. So I think I'm going to welcome Maria Luisa and start the Q&A.
Our first question is for Dr. Griffin. We've covered a huge range of authors in these 4 events. If we had intimate time, who else would you have loved to include?
That's always such a hard question. Oh my goodness. What we tried to do was name several of the people who we'd like to have included, perhaps some of the more oratory or some of the more contemporary writers who are writing now. I almost don't want to name them because I fear I'd be doing a disservice to some of the others. But, even people as recently as someone like Imani Perry, for for instance, who's writing beautifully, or Eddie Glaude. Elizabeth Alexander continues to write, as a beautiful essay that came out last year, The Trayvon Generation, in the New Yorker. Jelani Cobb. I mean, there's so many writers that it's hard to just choose a few.
Understandable. There's such a rich history and culture. It's certainly hard, and I had sneak peeks of the process, which was a huge honor. Thank you. This is for either for both you or Carolyn. So now that we caught up to the present, thoughts about how the library has acquired books by Black authors throughout its history. What was surprising about that when we started working on this series?
That was actually a question I asked Farah, because I was wondering myself, did she think that was unusual or surprising at all that the library had purchased so many of these? And and as we saw, that goes back to the earliest times, back to the 1700s. We had some of these some of the slave narratives in our collections and other works throughout the time. So it was kind of surprising to me, but I was really heartened to see it, and I think it sort of strengthened some thoughts I had about the library and its place in this city and in educating New Yorkers over the years. But I'll leave it to Farah, because I think we had talked about this.
Right, we just talked about it, and I have been pleasantly surprised. That I would it's like a game show that I play in my head. I just come up with a name, and that author would be in the collection. It might not be the exact title that I was thinking of, but something written by that author would be in the collection, and it would be something that had been acquired, close to the time of publication. So it just said to me that the members were reading; they were reading widely, that they were interested in quality writing, and they were also interested in learning, which shouldn't surprise us. People who like libraries tend to be people who like to learn and read broadly and widely. So it was just a pleasant surprise.
No, absolutely. So here's a question for you both. How do you embody, for example, Octavia Butler or Ta-Nehisi Coates, or to be more specific, could you both describe the process of becoming, providing the voices to the more current people you're reading from?
Okay, I'll jump in. I'll tag. It's really through research. What my process was just researching the history, the story, getting more of the background. Some of it was a little more difficult to kind of find like intricate details, but really I just tried to kind of jump into the time period or the specific location, and really try to get to the heart of each of the characters and what they all were going after in the performance.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I concur with what Ms. Thrash said. I think basically understanding what's being said, what's being expressed, kind of clues us into who these authors are and what their intent was in the writing, even if they weren't trying to express a direct reflection of their thoughts or themselves, but the characters. It's like Shontelle said, understanding the times, understanding the climate in which it was written. And because we are closer in age, it wasn't that far for us to reach to access it, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it does. Thank you. I just want to say that, and on behalf of everybody, and I know from the comments and from our very own event that you both have done brilliantly.
Thank
Absolutely extraordinary. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a question from the audience. How would you describe the library's collection of Black literature at present time, and what are your plans for building the collection going forward?
Well, I mean, I think through this process, I think we have discovered that it's a pretty wonderful collection and fairly comprehensive, surprisingly, and that feels good. That we've been acquiring books widely, throughout the years. I think we have an extraordinary acquisitions department, and we have long been putting together reading lists, which you will find on our website, and you can find the last sort of 3 years worth of Black History Month reading lists, which cover a great ground of fiction and literature and poetry and nonfiction subjects, policing, social justice, police brutality. So it covers a great deal. But what I should say is, what we also encourage is that our members should be suggesting works to us as well. We, very much buy for the membership. And so if there are works that are of interest to the members and think that it should be in our collection, we'd like to know about it. So let us know.
Steve, our head of acquisitions, is always looking for suggestions, which is really exciting. Since we're drawing to a close, here's the final question. This is for Dr. Griffin. After viewing all the events and visiting the current exhibit, which is fantastically done, I am astonished to realize how little I read of these writers. When I was in school, we brushed past slavery, the civil rights movement, Jim Crow, and the like, with just a tiny mention of the Harlem Renaissance. Could you explain the reason why there's a continued racial superiority in the educational literary canon? How are things improving now, or not?
Well, I do think that things are improving, but I think that, there used to be, when I was coming through graduate school, we talked about the canon wars. And they really are wars. They're sort of ideological and intellectual battles about what matters to a culture and to a society. And it's one thing to have books that are, and I hope that what you've learned is that the books are always being published, or if not being published, they're always being written, that every group of people creates its storytellers who want to tell the stories and get them out. And so the books are being written, and oftentimes they're being published, and sometimes they're being published by activist publishers like the abolitionist movement. But there's a great distance between that happening and them actually getting in the hands of readers, and even more of a distance in them getting in the hands of educators. So I would say all you have to do is keep your eye on the kind of controversies about what's going to get allowed in a textbook in Texas, right? And who decides that? And sometimes it's not educators who decide it. Sometimes it's politicians who decide it. And that these are, they should be, we live in a democracy. We should have access to all the ideas that are out there, but we don't. And that the kinds of systemic racism that exist in all of our institutions even exists downright to what gets taught, what we learn in school. And that is one of the reasons why I think we have to continue to fight. We have to continue to press and insist upon opening up the canon, opening up what's possible. But we also have to take responsibility for our own learning and our children's learning, and realize that we have to expose young people to the ideas and the authors and the histories that we think would constitute them being educated people along the way.
Wonderfully said. Thank you. I believe that's the final question. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Luisa. Thank you, Farah. And thank all of you in the audience for attending tonight. Have a good night.